everyone. I'd like to again welcome everyone to our 2019 State of the Address, State of the Township, I'm sorry. And before we begin, I'd like to introduce you all to, I think, three of the most amazing team members that I work with as elected officials. So I'm going to start first with Joe. I want to introduce Mark Burney. Mark is one of our trustees, and he's our vice president. And I'd like to introduce next Joe Hunterlaw. He's one of our trustees, and he's amazing as well. And then also amazing is our fiscal officer who keeps us as legal as possible, and that's Dan Burney. So give them a hand. It's such a pleasure. They're such an awesome team to work with. Thank you. And my name is Gwen McFarland, and I am the president of the Springfield Township Board of Trustees. So we're going to go on into the program this evening. You guys want to stand up here? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. As the current president of the Board of Trustees, I welcome you tonight or this evening to our State of the Township address. It's just, and after I share with you my thoughts, I'm going to turn the program over to our administrator, Chris Gilbert. And he will provide a snapshot of the current state of the community, including what was accomplished by us in 2018 and what to look forward to in this year and beyond. And I like to think of as we together work forward, that is the key to success with better outcomes and solutions as well. Our township, like many other townships throughout the region and this country, are all in the midst of a change. These changes can be the result of a well-initiated actions towards change, outside forces that are pushing change, and also natural progression, or as we say, evolution of creating change. All of that is good. Change is inevitable. How many of you in this room, with a show of hands, like change? Great. That's why living in this community is awesome, because we're not afraid of change. We look for it. We don't run away from it, we run toward it. Change is inevitable, and as boards of trustees, we are continually positioning our township in this community to take advantage of the many, many opportunities that we have and that change offers for us as well. We have never been a community, and many of you know this, that was content with the, quote, status quo. We have never been a community that was afraid to try new things, or new ways of doing things, but we've always been that community that steps out and paves the path toward creating a much more efficient and responsive government for everyone in this room, the residents, and our businesses as well. I would say it was about 15 years ago, we were one of the first communities in this area to look at and dive into community utility aggregation. There is an individual in here this evening, I'm not going to point he or she out, that has a good question about her utility bill, and she will be able to speak with us after this meeting, okay? The other thing is, it's always been that we as a community, we always step out and look at a way we can pave the new path toward creating, again, more responsible and efficient government. I like to say that again. We have saved, back to electric and gas aggregation, we've saved thousands of dollars on everybody here on our gas and electric bills. We were one of the first also townships to adopt a property maintenance code. This property maintenance code is designed to improve dilapidated structures in our neighborhoods, and we also push for, with the county, partnershiping with the county, a county-wide land bank. And most recently, a new way of funding road repairs and starting and staffing a zoning and planning office with our fire personnel handling that. Now, you know, we are also fortunate, and tonight I looked out and I'm trying to see how many civic leaders are here, belong to civic associations with their neighborhoods. I've seen thus far one person, and that's Skip from Pleasant Run Farms. So Skip, could you stand up, please, from the farms? And give him a hand, because he's one of the civic leaders in his community. And are there any other civic leaders in this room besides Skip? If so, please stand up. So we are still gifted and blessed to have civic leaders like all in each one of our neighborhoods and communities. That's what makes Springfield Township great. We are used to and have an unwavering desire to always be first. And many of you know this. And it's because of that desire to lead, we always find a better way that we can take care of business, and we as a board and staff, and together, we as a community will continue to push for innovation, creativity, and for me, creativity is when you're thinking out of the box. That's always been one of our assets and our attributes. Also, collaboration and resolve in to forge forward in a path for a brighter future for our township. There are many exciting accomplishments over the past year, and many more yet to come within our future. Now I'm going to turn the meeting over to our administrator, Chris Gilbert, so he can dive a little deeper into what some of these major accomplishments are, as well as what the future looks like for Springfield Township. So with your blessings, I'd like to turn the meeting now over to Chris Gilbert, our administrator. Chris, give him a hand, please.
Thank you, Gwen. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for coming out this evening and giving up this beautiful night that's outside right now. We weren't sure how many people would be able to make it tonight, but I do really appreciate you giving up your time to be here. It's hard to believe that it's been just a little over a year since I began as township administrator, and as I started to think about what I was going to present tonight and what we were going to talk about, this idea of a puzzle came to mind, and that Springfield Township, to me, looks much like a puzzle, both geographically. If you ever look at a map, Springfield Township is fragmented. There are many different pieces and islands, and that's all as a result of incorporation over the years. Additionally, from a service delivery standpoint, we are also like a puzzle in that there are many different socioeconomic sort of situations at play in Springfield Township, many different neighborhoods. So again, managing this community, working for this community, you really start to see Springfield Township as a puzzle. Additionally, what makes up that is the pieces of the puzzle for the organization. As Gwen talked about, which I'm glad she did when she talked about change, because that's a large focus of my presentation this evening as well, is that the creativity, the innovation, the change agents that we are all individual pieces of how this organization operates, but when you put them together, it forms Springfield Township and the organization and the employees that go out there and work hard to serve you and provide services to you every day. So I appreciate that notion of change. I know that innovation and creativity is not new to Springfield Township. Charlie Harper, who was an artist in Springfield Township, he had a creative and innovative way to paint nature, which still inspires people throughout the world today. The first machine that was used to cultivate wheat and modernized farming was implemented and created and designed here in Springfield Township. And then also the first suspension bridge in Ohio was here in Springfield Township, just traversing the Mill Creek. So history tells us that Springfield Township is home to innovation, home to change and creativity. And we as Springfield Township employees still look to employ that today and put that in everything we do when we get to work each day. Additionally, the evolution of this township, such as it being developed as a bedroom community to incorporation, which led us to be fragmented like we are, has presented some challenges and limitations as it relates to servicing this community or funding certain programs and needed repairs, whether it be roads. Being a bedroom community is very difficult to raise the needed revenue in order to tackle tough problems like infrastructure spending. But with those same challenges and limitations create opportunity. We understand that those challenges are why we are exceptional is what we do, and which I'll explain here in just a second. What these departments do every day is exceptional. With the resources that they have, these limitations and these challenges are not the obstacle or the hindrance that we see. Our employees look at these things and see that as we are exceptional in what we do in providing services, not in spite of these challenges and limitations, but because of them. They inspire us to be innovative and creative, and they force us to. So without those challenges and limitations, we wouldn't be able to be as cutting edge as we have in some of the things that Gwen's already talked about, which we will dive into here a little deeper. It reminds me of a quote that out of limitation comes creativity. That's our mantra. That's what we live by every day. And that's what I challenge staff to look at every day. And you'll see here in just a second how those changes and limitations, what our response was, and what the results of our response entail. So before I get into the agenda, I have some ground rules of how this meeting is going to work. I promise that it's not going to be like this State of the Union. I'm not going to say huge or terrific or any of the other words that you hear him say 1,000 times, but at the same time, you have to promise not to do that to me. Because that's not nice and you're going to distract me. So only clap if you mean it. So what are we going to look at today? The past changes and limitations and the challenges that we face. How did we respond to those changes and limitations? How did those responses work for us last year? Is that evolution that we're going through that Gwen talked about as a community and an organization, is it working? And then what's next? What are we looking for next? So let's dive into what were those changes and limitations. Well, first off, as I talked about just a few minutes ago, changes in leadership. We in Springfield Township take succession planning very seriously. We knew that my predecessor, Mike Kinnigan, was retiring several years before he actually did. And we were planning for that change. And as a result, we were able to make that leadership change fairly seamlessly. Now, over the past year, there's been some hiccups that maybe people haven't been aware of, probably more me internally, just wasn't really sure what to do or what not to do. But I think that we've came through that unscathed, and hopefully, as a result of the accomplishments that you see from 2018, that succession planning worked fairly well. In every single department that we have individuals that are ready to step in, sort of be that next man or next woman in when the time is called. We take training and leadership training in this organization extremely seriously so that we as a community always have someone ready, able, and competent to step in when there's a need. So obviously that was a change. That was an evolution in leadership, and had to devise plans in order to make sure that we were able to carry on seamlessly as mentioned. I'm not going to harp on this too much, but another limitation and challenge that we've had to face over the last few years is the state budget cuts, which put all of that pressure back on local governments. Obviously, you can see who's the state budget cuts and who's the local government. It's the guy carrying it. But they essentially did put all that responsibility on the shoulders of the local government. And we've had to figure out innovative ways in order to resolve that issue. Also, what I'll talk about a little bit in the presentation is how local governments, especially from a bureaucratic standpoint, sort of operate in these silos. And unfortunately, it's not a very sustainable or efficient way to operate, and we're trying to change that culturally and organizationally moving forward. You see here these individuals, look at this as township employees, they're in these individual departments, but there's not a lot of cross sort of operationally work going on. We do more than most, but we're going to push the boundaries to do even more. So how do we build that bridge between the silos going forward or completely tear the silos down? Infrastructure spending. As I mentioned, being a bedroom community, we simply just don't have the revenue necessary to adequately respond to and fund infrastructure repairs. I can tell you that we've done wonders over the last 3 years, which I have a slide that will show you what that looks like, but it's still not enough, and we know that. The difficulty is a bedroom community, and given the fact that we are a very limited amount of the taxes you pay in Springfield Township, we have limited revenue to put toward that. We came up with an innovative way to raise additional revenue from an alternative source. However, it's still not enough and still a challenge that we're looking for solutions for. Additionally, we also have an Arts Connect group that is growing by leaps and bounds. Now, that's one of the good challenges, one of the good problems to have. So we're looking at how can we create a venue, a space for them to grow in and get out of the small bowl, if you will, that they're in now. And then lastly, the mindset, the culture is a challenging limitation. And this isn't, no local government, no government for that matter, anywhere is immune to this, which is, this says it all. What if we don't change it all, something this magical happens? Let's just sit around and wait for it to change. It's not going to happen. That's the bureaucratic model that isn't sustainable anymore. We as a local government continue to have to innovate and evolve for us to be viable going forward, and that's what we're trying to do organizationally. So what was our response? There is a gentleman that we brought in to talk to our leadership team that spoke about play chess, not checkers. And my staff is probably rolling their eyes now because we've talked about this a lot. Simply what that means is we can no longer sit back and just be reactive to what happens, which is like what you do in a game of checkers. We have to play chess. We have to be strategic. We have to be out there trying to think ahead, 10 steps ahead of what we're going to do. Organizationally, that's going to take some changes and some new policies and programs, which we're implementing now, but that's the focus. No longer just sit back and hope something will happen and just react to it. We're going to have to be actively out there, strategically moving our pieces around so that we're in the best position to win. So what does that look like? We're moving from the typical hierarchical organization, bureaucratic model as a machine, and moving more to the organism model. So what does that mean? What does that really look like? This is your typical hierarchical organization. In the private sector, a lot of businesses are no different. You have these individual departments and silos. It's not a sustainable model going forward. We have to move to this, where we have cross-departmental teams working on issues together. We do that now. Our response is that we created a code enforcement division within the fire department. Why does that make sense? Well, one, can you argue that it saves township money? Yes, because now you don't have duplicative efforts among the same employees. More importantly, you have staff in the fire department that have the expertise already in code enforcement. They enforce fire codes. But to you as residents, why does it really matter? Well, beyond the cost savings, now we have inspectors out in the field performing these code inspections that are also able to respond to emergencies when the tow drops and that could be already closer to your property than just responding from the firehouse. There's a lot of reasons to do it. From what I understand, we may be the only fire department in the state that's doing this, maybe even the country. I see this as something that you're going to see a lot of communities emulate over time. We had our first full year doing it last year, and they responded to hundreds of complaints, did close to 1,000 inspections, and is working very well. Now, it takes a mindset, a culture shift for our fire department to see that that's a value-added service they can provide to the residents. And at the same time, it takes a pretty dynamic board of trustees that gives us, as staff, the authority to try these creative ideas and see if they work. This has worked very well. Additionally, we've looked how can we better leverage our public works department. We're saving in excess of $100,000 a year because we're in-house performing nuisance abatement on problem properties. We have a situation now where we have a public works employee that deals with these property owners from the beginning of the complaint to when we actually have to be on the property to clean it up. What does that do? It streamlines the process. It reduces costs. So again, going back to this model, we are cross-pollinating these departments so that there is no longer that I just simply work for the Public Works Department, I don't do anything else. No, we are township employees first, and we're always going to do what's in the best interest of this community. We don't care what department you work for. Additionally, we've eliminated the assistant administrator position, my previous position. Why did we do that? Again, going back to that succession planning, we have individuals within our departments that have been adequately trained to take on additional responsibilities. We've created a model by which those additional responsibilities don't hinder them, but in fact creates a better opportunity for us to be more efficient. So instead of having an assistant administrator, now we have taken our public works director and made him the Director of Development and Infrastructure, and our previous executive assistant is now the Director of Administrative Services. So those responsibilities that were borne by me as the assistant administrator are now being shared by 3 of us. Instead of having 4 employees, now we have 3, which is saving in excess of $100,000 a year. Additionally, we created an innovative, I'm not going to say it's innovative because it's actually a law that we're utilizing and no one else does, but we are using the assessment process as it relates to road resurfacing programs. We've resurfaced 14 different neighborhoods or projects within neighborhoods with pretty much unanimous support for the assessment process. I'd be happy to talk to you about that, so would Michael, the Director of Infrastructure, after this meeting, how that actually works. But we've been able to pave an exponentially more roads in the last year or 2 than we have in the previous 10 because of this process. We created the Joint Economic Development Zone. While at the time was contentious, is the only way that we're able to do what we're doing today. Without that alternative funding source, that backpack that you see on top of the local government guy would have crushed him. The judge stabilized that and is allowing us to move forward like we are now. We created the Business Retention and Expansion Program that we talked about last year at this particular meeting. We're going to go out and meet with existing businesses, helping them expand and grow within our community. We know that the majority of job growth, which is now important to us as a community because of the Joint Economic Development Zone, we know that the majority of that growth is going to happen from existing businesses. So we need to go out and see what they need in order for us to help them and foster that growth and expansion here in our community. We created various grant programs within our Community Improvement Corporation so that we can do innovative things in our neighborhoods. I know Skip is a civic leader at Pleasant Run Farms. That particular neighborhood has benefited greatly from the neighborhood enhancement grant process in the CIC. We've also created the Business Improvement Grant Program to help those businesses as we go out and meet with them through our Business Retention Program, which is called Business Matters. Lastly, if you also live and work in Springfield Township, you're probably already aware of the Residential Incentive Grant, which is an enticement for individuals that already work here to move into Springfield Township, and so that they can receive that grant for the amount of money that they're paying into the judge. And lastly, to further incentivize our employees with that thinking of innovation, we've created the Internal Employee Innovation Grant Program that allows employees from all corners of the organization to propose an idea. It goes through a vetting process, and if we think it's viable, we will actually put funding behind it to see if it works. Our recipient last year was Mark Goldick out of the Public Works Department. He created a piece of equipment that allows us to basically street curb a lot faster and more efficiently, which is saving us tens of thousands of dollars a year for a piece of equipment that probably costs them $20 to make. So it's those kind of things that we're trying to foster within our organization so that we can be further efficient and innovative in providing services to this community. So how do these solutions and how do these responses work for us in 2018? Is it actually working for us? Is the evolution working? You know, my son, who is a big science kid, and he's always sitting at the dinner table talking about evolution. And I think one of his heroes is Charles Darwin, who I think said, if you don't need, the strongest, I'm not going to get this right, he's going to kill me when I get home. But it's something like, the strongest and the smartest animal doesn't always survive. It's always the one that has the ability to evolve and adapt. Now, I'm not going to say that we're not the strongest and the smartest, but we are looking to survive because we're going to evolve and adapt. But then my wife, who likes to prod him and just get him going, and it drives me nuts sitting there. So as she's cleaning up, homework mess and cleaning up dishes from dinner, says, well, if that's true, if evolution really works, then why don't I have more than 2 hands? Because moms need more than 2 hands. I'm sure your moms out there know that. And that shuts him up pretty quickly. So how did our response work? What was the results in 2018? The Neighborhood Master Plan, which was created initially in 2011 and then updated in 2016, we've accomplished more than 20 of the objectives out of that master plan last year. So this isn't a document that we created and just sit on the shelf. It's something that we look at every day and making sure that the policies and programs we're implementing are directly tied back to accomplishing what was decided upon with that 70+ member resident committee that created this document. Road repaving, lots of it. I know Mike Gould, our Director of Infrastructure back there, is tired of seeing road repaving projects, but we've done a lot. We still have a lot to do. You can see the progress that's been made. The amount of roads that went from a good condition in 2016 to a good condition in 2019 is well over 60%. We've also decreased the amount of roads that were in poor condition by almost 30%. So we are making progress, albeit, in my opinion, still not enough. It's not that we don't know how to repave roads or how to fix them. It's a funding issue, and we're working on that. But at the same time, you can see the progress is made, and that's mainly because now, whereas previously all we focused on were the streets in the red, those streets are 10 times more expensive than the streets that are in the yellow. So we were looking to reduce how do we fix the yellow streets before they become red. Well, that's because we get in and fix them before they get to a state so deteriorated that it costs 10 times more to fix them. You know, it's similar to the analogy of fix a hole in your roof before you have to actually put a hole in your roof on. And that's where the assessment process has come in. That's where residents have seen the value in that process, and you're seeing the number of yellow streets decrease, the number of green streets increase, the number of red streets decrease as well. Additionally, from an economic development standpoint, we've seen over $7 million in economic investment from the private sector in Springfield Township last year. That's not enough, in my opinion. We're going to do our best to make it better in 2019 and 2020. Arlington Cemetery is putting in a multi-million-dollar facility. And then you've seen the first phase of the Citrus Street Farmers Market open at the corner of Corbett and Winton, and they have a phase 2 scheduled to be under construction this year. You also seen this from an economic development standpoint go out and brand this community. Our new gateway signage, it's the doormat of our community, and we have to make sure that we're branding us correctly. If you think that branding and marketing for a local government is a waste of money, you're sadly mistaken. We are in a competitive field with every other community for those jobs, for those businesses, for those residents. We have to make sure that we are providing a holistic set of services and not just focusing on one. And that's why our branding and marketing is vitally important to make sure that we can continue to be innovative and create programs that push us forward into the future. We talked about the Business Matters program. Again, something that we're going to continue to tout and go out and talk to our businesses about what their needs are so that we can make sure they stay here and grow here. Partnering with communities like Habitat for Humanity to make huge impacts in particular neighborhoods. This one is from West College Hill, where they did a Rock the Block event, where we went out and made improvements to private properties, and they're also in the process of constructing new homes for individuals in a neighborhood that probably hasn't seen investment in more than 50 years. Huge to that neighborhood. You can see the important volunteers that are out there working and giving up their Saturday to do that. Obviously, ours are out there as well, making improvements to the park in that particular neighborhood. We talked about the Springfield Township Community Improvement Corporation and the grants. A little more information. Over $200,000 in residential incentive grants were issued last year, $20,000 in business improvement, and a little over $5,000 in neighborhood enhancement. Community events and programs. As I said, we're not a one-trick pony when it comes to services. We have to make sure that we provide a whole plethora of quality of life events and programs and services for our residents. This is just one of those, actually several of those. And Kim Flam does a phenomenal job of managing that. She's our communications director, but also runs and is the director of the Arts Connect program, the nonprofit Arts Connect that we created to allow us to better provide these events and programs, a lot of times which are funded 100% by donations and operated by volunteers. So you can see we provided 10 concerts, had 105 summer kids in summer camp here in Springfield Township, issued over 300 tickets awarded for free events. Had 32 events and 5,600 people come through in 2018. Little over almost $60,000 in grants and sponsorships were given to Arts Connect. And then obviously you've seen, if you've came through Winton Road, the first mural project completed in Springfield Township. So it went from what I would consider an eyesore to something that's now an asset to that business going on. Additionally, Gwen talked about the utility aggregation programs that we have. Last year, collectively, we saved residents in excess of $250,000. Additionally, we have here tonight a representative from the Greater Cincinnati Energy Alliance who we've partnered with to provide technical information to residents to further provide utility savings, whether that be on energy efficiency programs or even possibly solar. So I would encourage you to meet with him later, and he can teach you about how that partnership is working and what we can offer residents in that regard. The Public Works Department removed brush from over 1,300 homes in last year's ice storm. Took them weeks to do. Obviously, is a service that isn't something that we customarily do, but however, in this situation, we knew that it was vitally important that we can remove that debris from residential properties, and their staff took weeks to do that. As I talked about, they have the nuisance abatement program within their department. 153 nuisance properties and over 700 violations were abated. Responded to over 800 calls for service. And then you've seen this a lot last year. It felt like over a 6-week period, it happened every other day. What residents don't realize, and what I see when those go out, I just see the cash kids. That's money we're throwing on the road. That winter storm last year cost us in excess of $250,000 in employee time and materials. You don't think of it that way. You just want your street plowed and the salt to be put down. What we are doing, going back to one of the innovative things, is Mike, our director, has created this concoction, a cocktail, if you will, he's called it Ice Begone Magic. It's basically made from a vodka byproduct. It allows us to reduce the amount of salt we have to put down by almost a third. Now, oftentimes when we create something innovative like that, we've solved one problem, but unfortunately sometimes we create another one as a result. And that unfortunately was the case with this vodka byproduct. Well, it works great. We created this issue. Now, that's our police department parking lot. That's deer licking up the vodka byproduct. So, well, we've solved the money problem by salt. But now we have to have some treatment program for all the drunk deer.
Sell the deer for venison and use the money to pay for it.
The Grove and the Community Center, operated by Tom Schneider, had its second best year last year with well over 400 rentals and bringing in almost $300,000. Obviously, the facility we're in now. The fire department continues to do a great job of educating kids on the importance of fire safety. They educated over 1,500 kids last year on the importance of fire safety. Additionally, they responded to almost 6,000 calls for service. They were the third busiest department in Hamilton County. They were also named the Ohio Fire Department of the Year by the Ohio Department of Public Safety. So, give them a hand. That's the type of service that you get here in Springfield Township. Additionally, their ISO rating is at 2. Well, what does that mean for you? That means that they are in the top 2% of all fire departments in the country. They are better by that rating than 98% of all fire departments in this country because of that rating. They do a phenomenal job, and with the resources that they have, is hard to imagine what they can do. The police department, again, continue to do an outstanding job responding to over 27,000 calls for service, received the Community Service Award from the County Department of Disabilities, and then also graduated, again, going back to our succession planning, graduated 2 of our lieutenants from the police executive leadership class. So, where does that leave us? And where does that put us And I apologize, I missed one more thing with the police department. They also started, which I think is phenomenal, the Heroes for Helper, or the Helpers, I'm gonna get this wrong, the Heroes and Helpers program, where they actually take kids out from local elementary schools and go on a Christmas shopping trip with them. Chief, how many students did we have this year?
15.
15 students. And they rented a party bus, took them out. Those kids had the time of their lives, were able to shop around Target. And this was made possible by private donations of some of our officers, but also by a grant from Target. And were able to buy Christmas presents for themselves and for their family members and their siblings that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to. This program was initiated by 2 of our police officers who took it upon themselves to create it. And they did a phenomenal job. So that's really nice. So what are we looking at financially in Springfield Township, and what's happened, and where are we going? I think this is important to look at, because while it really doesn't matter when you're writing that tax check, and I know taxes are high, and it goes back to that bedroom community issue, 25% of the taxes you pay come to Springfield Township. The other 75% we have zero control over. So all the services that we've talked about tonight all come out of that 25%. The permanent appropriations last year was essentially our budget, was just shy of $27.5 million. This year, it's just over $26.5 million, which is about a 2.5% decrease from last year. Again, namely, we're trying to be more efficient, we're trying to do different things, and at the same time, we've had to look at how we're funding infrastructure to make it more sustainable going forward. So what does that look like, revenues by fund? As you can see, the vast majority of revenues come into our police and fire department. That's no surprise. The reason for that is because those 2 departments are very heavily dependent on personnel. I mean, between those 2 departments, you probably have close to 120 to 130 people. That is necessary in order to provide that service to this community, which is almost 18 square miles, 15,000 houses, and almost 40,000 people. The general fund, that is here because the JED's revenue is incorporated in this. However, a good portion of the JED's revenue is put back into public works as it relates to infrastructure. So the majority of the roads that are being repaved are being paid for by revenue coming in from the Joint Economic Development Zone. When you look at expenditures, again, obviously it correlates with the revenue. The majority of the spending comes out of police and fire. Public works is here. Now that number does include, which you can see the difference, it does include that amount of money that's coming from the general fund to help pay for infrastructure. And then general government here at $2.5 million. That's the administrative folk, the people behind the scenes. I see Kim Cox here, who's our finance director, and Kathleen, obviously, our director of administrative services. Larry Mullins, our HR director. We are the individuals behind the scenes that are helping support this department, and it's sort of like the Reg front office. So you can't have Joey Votto and all those people out there hitting home runs like our fire department and our police department without the people in the front office. So that's what we try to do every day, is help and support them and do the great job that they do. When we talk about infrastructure, what did it look like over the past few years? You can see in 2016, about 1.3 million. Up to last year, our record almost 3 million. This year, we're at about 1.6. Again, we have to be sustainable. $3 million a year is not a sustainable model until we receive additional revenue. And how do we do that? We do that through trying to increase the JED's revenue. Again, going back to economic development. My challenge to all of our staff is that there is no 1 or 2 people on an economic development staff. Everyone who works for Springfield Township, the Board of Trustees, and all of you in this room, and all the residents and businesses here, are part of the economic development team. What are you going to do to help us recruit people here? Businesses. That's my challenge to you, because we are all in this together. We have to increase revenue by means other than through property taxes for things other than police and fire. Unfortunately, the way that we're structured as a township government, police and fire are continually going to have to be funded through tax levies. It's just the nature of the business. It's how we operate. What we can do, however, is if we increase the JED's revenue to a point where we can start subsidizing those departments, we can reduce the dependency on property taxes and at the same time fund infrastructure. But we can't do that unless we have a robust economic development program to bring in those jobs and those businesses. So while I understand that there are challenges and I understand that individuals may have some issues with things that we do or don't do, at the end of the day, everyone has a vested interest. And purely for selfish reasons as a property owner, you would want your property to be higher value. It's no differently than if you own a majority of stock in Procter & Gamble, you're not going to go around and badmouth P&G so that your stock's plummeting. Why would you do that to the community you live in and you have your biggest investment in your life and your home in? We can work out our differences. And that's what I love about Springfield Township, is that as much of an issue that we may have in terms of what we do or don't do, it's always a very civil discourse, and we work together at the end of the day to get things done. And that's what we'll continue to do. But my challenge going forward is that we're all on the economic development team. It isn't just 2 people in admin. It isn't just a few people in police or public works or fire. It's all of us. And for us to be sustainable going forward, we're going to have to do that. So again, going back to, and I apologize for getting off on that tangent, but it's important so that this number can be doubled and it can be sustainable going forward. But the only way we're going to do that is by increasing revenue. But what we've been able to do over the last 3 years is nothing sort of amazing. Close to $8.7 million in road infrastructure improvements. That's 80 streets. There's 400 streets in Springfield Township. So it's almost a quarter of the streets that have been improved over the last 3 years. What does the general fund look like? Again, that infrastructure funding comes out of the general fund. What you see here in green, and you don't have to worry about the numbers, the green is the available revenue. The purple is the projected expenditures. What keeps me up at night and what I have to continue to think about is keeping these 2 lines apart. We do not want those to get close together. If they get close together, then we have a problem. So one of 2 things has to happen. We have to increase revenue or we have to decrease expenses. Same thing with the police district. You can see here, around 2022, 2023, they're going to be out of money on the projected path. What does that mean? That means we're going to have to come out and ask, I'm going to say it now, we're going to have to ask the residents to fund an additional tax levy to maintain the level of service you're currently getting from your police department. The way levies work is kind of like a bow tie. I know my staff, you say this all the time, they've seen the graph, I usually draw a board. Essentially, when you pass a levy, you're bringing in more money than you need. That's important because you're building up a reserve. Because at some point, these on a different model chart, these 2 lines cross and create that bow tie. So this buildup that you had over here, you're now drawing down and using when you're spending more than you're bringing in. You're drawing down that reserve. What this is showing is the reserve is gone in 2023. You can't operate that year. So in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to have to be out and ask residents, at what level do you want to continue to fund your safety service departments, and the police and fire district is in the same boat. Now, what I will say is that it will have been well over 10 years since they've received an increase in revenue. Those levies will never pass. We're only supposed to last 5 years. When we get to 2021, 2022, it will be 12 or 13 years that they've made that levy last. You can imagine when you have departments that big and that complex that operate on the same amount of revenue for well over a decade is nothing short of amazing, and they've done a good job being efficient in that regard. But at the same time, in order to maintain those services and the excellent service that we've already talked about, we're going to have to be out in the next 2 to 3 years to ask you to help fund those departments going forward. So what's next? Again, we just talked about it. Funding safety services. Unfortunately, we don't have an alternative source of revenue to fund a department that large. And there's not years like with infrastructure we can say, well, we'll just hold off on paving so many streets this year. Can't do that in those departments. You can't just say, well, we're not going to do that this year. So, vitally important. Additionally, as we talked about, being that holistic community and doing things other than just providing police and fire and road, we have to provide different quality of life things and make this community still attractive and amenable for residents that want to live here. We're looking at, going back to the issue of Arts Connect growing and needing a new space, we're going to undertake in the next year a remodeling of this building, a revitalization of this building as well as our community center. Why? Because in order to continue to make these properties still marketable, again, they bring in almost $300,000 a year rental revenue. That's how we're able to operate a lot of these facilities. In order to do that, they have to be marketable. So you have an asset, just like your home, you have to put money into them to make them still viable. That's what we're going to do here. Additionally, we're looking at building an outdoor amphitheater so that we can provide concerts and events for community members in addition to the other services we provide. Now, I know what you're saying, and I already hear it now. Our roads are crumbling, you need to fix roads, but now you're building this stuff. The beautiful part about this is we're not taking money away, operating revenue away that we typically would put toward infrastructure for these things. Revenue from a tax increment financing district called TIF is a revenue that's paid by business owners on Winton Road that it's not an increase in tax. They pay the same taxes they would have otherwise. It just goes into a special fund and it can only be used for specific capital improvements in the TIF district. So even if I wanted to use that money to do road repaving, I can't. It can only be used for things like this. So instead of making incremental changes to these buildings over time and not really making a big difference, we're going to utilize that revenue and build something that's lasting and something that the community can enjoy for decades to come. And then lastly, in addition to creating a more robust economic development program and doing different things that we've already talked about, this idea of innovation is something that we're going to take very seriously. And as the private sector has research and development departments, and no one would question why a pharmaceutical company has an R&D department, why doesn't government? Government who's asked to act like the private sector more and more, and who's asked to be efficient more and more, why aren't we creating departments where these ideas can be vetted out and implemented? So we are creating the township's first ever Office of Innovation and Sustainability. It's going to be called, the acronym is EPIC, Employees Promoting Innovative Change. That will be, again, going back to a cross collaboration amongst departments. It will be headed up by one of our lieutenants from our police department. And we will bring in representatives from each department so that we can take on ideas from every corner of this organization, and if they're viable, put them in practice. So, Gwen, you said we're going to think outside the box. We're really not. We're going to pretend like there is no box. So that's the new initiative this year organizationally, and I hopefully with some of the programs that we already have put in place over the years, and going forward, we're going to make this community more innovative and efficient than it's ever been. And I'll leave you with this, is that all of this seems insurmountable. And I'm sure that Nelson Mandela felt the same way, and those individuals in South Africa did years ago. But it always seems impossible until it's actually done, and that's what's going to keep pushing us forward. So, how do you stay connected with us? Obviously through email, Facebook, our website, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the social media sites. You can get a hold of us. And again, from a branding perspective, hopefully you see it and you want to live here because it is truly central to it all. Thank you, and I appreciate you coming out this evening.